How do you handle due diligence?
Data room. You got to have a data room. So
Sure.
what kind of businesses are they?
The non-emergency medical transport, the San Francisco liquor store, and the fence contracting company that's been limping along toward the finish line for almost 5 months now.
Yeah. Yeah, that can happen.
I'm learning a lot of lessons about licensed businesses
Yes.
and homegrown books
Yes. Or
and
multiple sets of books, right?
mhm,
You got the double
and
sets of books.
yeah, and just the benefit of a professional bookkeeper who uses professional bookkeeping software and how that changes the dynamic of a deal.
Oh, even QuickBooks. Even QuickBooks is
Yeah,
is yeah,
that's
just
I would call
just
that
use
professional
QuickBooks.
bookkeeping software,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
pros use it, amateurs use it too, but pros use
Yeah.
it.
It does
Um,
make a huge difference. I mean, when you're trying to sell a business and you ask them for a P&L and it takes them 4 weeks to get you a P&L and then they put it together in Excel and you've
uh-huh.
got problems with it and you ask them about it and oh, let me go back. I mean, buyers lose confidence very quickly. And
Yes.
you got to get those P&Ls. That's why I always try to get the P&Ls up front before I ever list a business, but you know, I have a situation now that's interesting where the business has two components and it's actually auto body and auto repair and the so there's two different components of it and now the seller is willing to sell one and not the other. He wants to sell both in combination, but if not, he's also willing to split them up and sell one and not the other, but his tax returns they're commingled. So it's like, well, then you need to get me P&Ls, you need to get me financial statements for each section, right? For
Yeah.
repair and then for auto body. And trying to separate that out, it can be a little bit of a challenge because at the end of the day, whatever they give you has to tie back to the tax returns. You can't have P&Ls that say, you know, I don't know, whatever, 100,000, 100,000 needs to equal 200,000. So if the tax returns 200,000, then you need that number, that 200,000 divided up between the two somehow, right?
Parts
So
should add up to the whole.
yes, exactly. You can't have 1 plus 1 equaling 3. And you can it just so it gets complicated, but and so, had we done that from the beginning, the business wouldn't have been listed yet because those would have been in in my process. It's like I want all of those, the P&Ls, all that stuff up front before I ever
Yeah.
sign a rep agreement. Because otherwise, I got burned so many times marketing a business where you have all these buyers come in that are really interested in all that. And then you go back to the seller, say, okay, give me the financials or give me the tax returns. And then they stall you out for the next 6 weeks. And then the buyers
Yeah.
get pissed off and leave, right? And you just burn buyers. And then the next time that a buyer sees your name on a listing, they just blow it off. It's like, yeah, they're not going to have any of the financials. They're not going to have any of the documentation I need. So it's just going to waste my time. And so you end up burning, you just don't want to burn buyers that way. So,
Yeah. Hmm. Huh. Um, so have you ever refused a listing because they were not prepared with their books? I mean, it sounds like probably yes, if you're
yeah.
trying to get P&Ls up front before the rep agreement, that kind of leads to the, yeah, your books are too messy, or unavailable. I just
Yeah.
can't represent this business. So yeah.
No, there was actually a furniture manufacturer that had been referred to me in out of Arizona.
Mhm.
And he and his wife were doing handwritten ledgers. And I was like, no, is a no. That's not going to work. You need to be able to provide regular printouts You're going to have to either hire a bookkeeper or hire a part-time somebody and go out and get QuickBooks Online or Wave or any accounting software that's online and have them sit there for and go back through your ledgers and enter all that data for the last 3 years. Because until you can produce an actual printed P&L, it's not going to work. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah,
Somehow we're muddling through, but you know, it's one of those things where nobody's happy.
yeah.
Which is,
Well, I had another one that was a larger deal where they didn't use QuickBooks. They did use QuickBooks, but they had another system that they used, and the two weren't integrated very well. And literally, all their financial statements had to come from their CPA, and so they were not able to give me P&Ls on a monthly basis, but they were able to give me P&Ls on a quarterly basis from a CPA. So it was like not, not the best,
mm,
but but the fact that it was coming from the CPA gave the buyers, gave me a better excuse to give the buyers is like, look, we can get these. The CPA only does them quarterly, and then even then, it takes 4 to 6 weeks for the CPA after the quarter ends to get them done. So you've got this long 4 month, 5 month delay, which made it excruciating. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then, when buyers head to Chat GPT and generate the mother of all due diligence requests
Yeah.
and just dump it on you.
Hmm.
There's some measure of maybe paring it down to what's reasonable for the
Yeah.
business in question. But then any tools, tips, or tricks for managing or tracking what's been delivered? And I mean, delivering it by
Yeah.
way of data room is, that makes sense. That's what I'm doing. But I haven't seen any great tools for, you know, um, bank statements for the last 24 months or whatever the request is. And then, you've got that little box and we've got the stuff for
Right.
that box. So,
Yeah, so what I do is I just convert the request list into an Excel spreadsheet. And if it's real lengthy and they have different sections, I'll put one section on a different tab just so it's not so, overwhelming.
uh-huh.
And then I'll add a column to it that just has a little, and actually it's not, I do it in Google Sheets, not in Excel. So it's
Yeah.
shareable, but in Google Sheets, then I just have a little drop down where for status, where it can be either not started, in progress, or completed. And then
Uh,
in each one of those, so they all start off with not started. And then whatever's in the data room, I can go and very quickly just say completed and flip those. Um, and then I add a column for notes also, so that if there's anything, specific, like sometimes on their due diligence, they ask questions, or let's say they have a document request, they want any correspondence with any government authority regarding hazardous waste. And if there is
yeah.
none, then in the notes column, we just put none. And and
Yeah.
then that answers the question and
Uh-huh.
keeps it going. But that way I can share the Google Sheet not only with the buyer, but also with the seller. And then as the seller is uploading things to the data room, they can go into the Google Sheet and mark off that it's been completed. And the buyer can go and they can look at everything and so that's how I've found that it helps to manage it. Um,
Uh-huh. Yep.
and the other thing is, the seller can also go in and there are certain requests that are just seller's just not going to provide, period.
Yeah.
And so then, we'll go in and flag those as well and just say, yeah, this is seller will not provide. We'll put that in the comments. So it's very clear, not going to be providing this. Do what you want with it.
And do you give right access to buyer and seller
Well,
or read
I
only?
I I do I do because or comment, at least comment capability, but to seller, I want them to be able to flip the status and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And to be able to enter notes. The buyer, that one's, I'd rather have the buyer just set them up as comments instead of editor, because I don't want them coming in, and I don't want anybody coming in and deleting somebody else's notes.
Yeah.
And you can always, I mean, the bottom line is I have my subscription to Google I have the business subscription, so it tracks all the changes, the document, and versions them. So if a
Mhm.
seller came in and started deleting, or a buyer came in and started deleting information or whatever, um, we'd be able to track it backwards. It would just be a lot of work. So I don't have time to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I landed on basically that method, but I'm sharing it only with my buyer so that I can track what could, in this case, somebody else is I'm sorry, my seller. So in this case, somebody else is representing the buyer.
Oh, gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
but he falls in the Luddite category.
Well, then what I would do
So
is maybe share it with the buyer on a view
yeah,
only,
yeah.
so that the buyer can see that there's progress being made and can see what's been done. Because the other thing I do sometimes is, depending on the data room that you're using and all that, in the notes, I might, if I mark something complete, if it's a document request, then I might indicate the folder, or what the document number, or depending on the data rooms, different ways of identifying things. But, I might
Yeah,
indicate what that is, so they know not only is it in the data room, but here's how to find it quickly.
yeah, yeah,
So you can do that as well.
yeah.
But
Good ideas coming from residential mortgage. The when you get conditions on a loan, there's little bins for each and every underwriting request, and you take the pay stubs and drop them in that little bucket, and you take the bank statements and and like, man, that would be perfect for this.
yeah,
um, so that everything is just connected and everybody knows exactly, you can see instantly what's been provided, and it's
right.
attached to the right request and all of that. But yeah,
Well,
this
that's one of the things. I mean, I use DocSend as for my data room, and so that's one of the things that I started doing was, um, in terms of the
compartmentalizing.
notes. Yeah, well, I mean, so I have a folder structure and all that in there, but in the Google Sheet, I actually can put the URL of
Mm,
and link to the folder where the documents are. So if there's a document request for bank statements, then in the notes, I mark it completed, but I'll also put a link to the folder over in DocSend, and that way all buyer has to do is click on the link, and as long as they're logged in, they'll either log in first or whatever, but as long as they are supposed to have access to it, then they will, and they can get there
yeah,
quickly.
yeah,
So yeah, you're right. I mean, it depends on how much the tools that you're using, right? And because every data room works a little bit differently. And so what are the capabilities, and what can you do to try and make it easy for the buyer and for the seller? We want seller to upload all the documents to the data room, and then also, I want the seller to mark in to answer and respond to the the Google Sheet that has all the requests in it. And usually I'll walk through it with them, when after I first get it into that Google Sheet format. I'll usually spend an hour to 2 hours on the phone with the seller, going through each item. And if it's a document request, that's easy. Everybody understands it. But if it's just a question about, has your accounting, have there been any changes in your accounting method in the last 5 years? Have you changed from cash to accrual, or accrual to cash, or whatever? And, well, that's a yes or no. So I mean, so we go through all of those, all the yes or no stuff, or anything that needs kind of just an answer. I try and get that in a phone call with the seller, so that we can get a whole bunch of the easy stuff out of the way right at the beginning. because then that tells the buyer, then we show it to the buyer and it's like buyer looks and, oh, okay, well, you've got a lot of this done already. You got 40% of this out of the way. Okay, great. Then they feel like like the seller is cooperating. So, but there's due diligence is always interesting. I've had private equity groups or PE wannabes that have sent over a 17-page document, a due diligence list, 17 pages. And it's just like, this is a $300,000 business. Are you out of your mind? And there's like an entire section on unions where there's no union, it's
Yeah.
not a union shop. And so all that nonsense, which is probably what you're experiencing a little bit when with some of the chat GPT, it's
Uh-huh.
probably pretty extensive and you're having to go through and kind of call it out. Um, what's interesting about it is that, if you go back to the buyers and say, okay, is there a specific reason that you are requesting this information because seller doesn't have it readily available and we can hire somebody or put it together if it's important. Why do you need it? What are you looking for? And a lot of times they don't know. It was just on the list and they'll say, don't worry about it. And then you cross it off. And then in the notes you say buyer, currently not available, buyer waves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes good sense. And um, happy to hear I'm kind of on the right track with it. But yeah,
It can
I
be
think you got a pretty
cumbersome.
good.
Well, I can tell you what's interesting is DocSend just put together their, I don't know if it's released yet, but I know I'm in their beta test program. So they have a due diligence tracker that they're putting to in
Oh,
DocSend. And that's really cool because then what you can do is take the list that the buyers brought over to you, go over and make sure you set up your folder structure similarly to how they've got things identified in different sections, and then you can send requests, document requests to the seller, and it'll track, and you can put due dates, or you can assign it to somebody other than the seller too. So you can put different requests in there and assign it to different people, and then it'll track whether it's pending or whether it's completed. It'll track all that for you. And then,
yep, that's exactly what I was, yeah,
yeah,
envisioning.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then, when the seller uploads it right now, and I haven't looked at it in the last couple of days. Right now, when the seller uploads, it goes just to the home folder, and then you as the admin have to move it to the correct place. But I know that they are working on giving you the ability to just specify the folder it's supposed to go to, so that when the seller uploads it, it goes directly to that folder and then marks it as completed. And then because DocSend, because it's a data room, it tracks everything. It has an audit trail for everything. So
Oh,
so ultimately that's how it's going to work. And they also it also will have the ability, I think they already have the ability to upload a CSV file with the
mm,
requests. So you don't, you know, so you don't have to type in all of the different
yeah.
requests individually because that would suck. Or copy
Yeah.
and paste. But if you have kind of a general due diligence list that is kind of your basic starter, you can put that all into a CSV and then auto populate that as far as document requests go, and then assign it due dates and everything else. So yeah, it's it's going to be very cool once like I said, right now and there it's kind of in pieces, and I have I have access to some of it because I'm in their beta test program, and then I have calls with them periodically to just say, okay, so here's the next phase that we need. So it's kind of
Yeah.
cool. They're
Awesome.
very responsive though.
Yeah, that sounds super helpful and almost exactly what I was picturing from the mortgage world. Like, yeah, this problem's been solved. This
Exactly,
needs
right?
to be
Yeah.
adapted.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
way, I'm kind of picturing something where, seller uploads documents and then the admin, the broker, kind of moderates, and both sides can add comments, but they don't go directly to each other. It's moderated so that you still retain control of the conversation.
Yeah.
I could see online arguments. If both have right or comment access, I could see the potential for, you know, things to spiral.
Yeah. No, I mean, and basically once a seller uploads or whomever it's been assigned to, once a document is uploaded, they have no more access to it unless they're going in and having view access like they would, or being able to download it, or being able to enter a comment or a question. And
Yeah,
they can enter questions on specific documents, which do go to you as the admin. And
yeah,
then
yeah,
those questions, you can forward them to whomever, you can answer them, and the questions can either be published or not. So when you respond to it, you can then publish it if you want to, and then anybody who has access to the data room can see the question and the answer. So that
yeah,
is also kind of interesting in terms of being able to set up kind of a Q&A um, before you have an LOI or before you're in due diligence, where you have people asking questions about the sim or asking questions about the financials, things like that. If they ask through the system, then you can answer it and then publish it, and then anybody else who has access to that document can also see those questions and those answers. So, so there's a few cool things in there, but
yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
yeah.